Welcome back. Welcome in. It's Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com. It's a Paramount podcast. I am Mike Casassa here, day after Christmas, with more gifts for you, joined by Chris Anderson, a present all of his own. Man, through the years, Chris, so many people have wondered um, just what it's like. I don't know, not just covering a team or recruiting and all that, but there was something about the Neal Brown tenure that I think just attract a lot of people to look at it for good reasons. Don't get me wrong, um, which we probably should talk about. But I think for other reasons are what make people so curious about his regime, his time in charge, the people under his purview, and just how it all functioned. And I don't know, did it contribute to how things didn't work on the field or how just never really clicked? So many examples we can think of, like the hostage video for one. And then just a coaching transition here, a coaching change where, again, I don't think it was too crazy or too long. Um, Man, it was much briefer than the 2007 coaching change. That was like a month long, and it landed where it started, which kind of what happened on this one, I guess, too, even though it was only about a third of the time. And I don't know, we get all these things in our notebook and all these stories that we share and hear and kind of pin to use somewhere. We never really have a place for them, um, except for today. This seems like a good idea to just I don't know, work out some kinks, kind of empty the clip, so to speak. Not in a bad way, but I think in a way that a lot of people are curious what it was like, what it's been like, as we get used to what it's going to be like again under Rich Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you put it like it doesn't. It's not necessarily mean empty the clip in a bad way. Like for all the people that are expecting some, terrible stories. I don't know if there's going to be many of those, if any. Not sure. Like to Neal Brown and some of the staffers' credit, like I mean, I got at least one, so it's not completely all rainbows and sunshine, but to what people have said, and even before Neal Brown was fired, and even what Ren Baker said during the press conference announcing it and explaining it, was that he's a good guy, and the people around him are typically good people, and so not a whole lot of completely negative stories, but just some fun stuff, some things we're going to talk about. We do this for the recruiting things after a signing class is over, put up the X files and tell stories from behind the scenes of how the class got put together and things with different players and stuff. And there was a call for it, Mike, to get more of a coaching X Files out there on our time covering this program during the Neal Brown era. And like you said, the search before and after. Do you remember a lot of that search to begin with? Let's start where it started. The transition from Dana Holgerson to Neal Brown. Other than the fact that I was sitting with my wife at home on New Year's Eve and I was like, no, literally, honey, like 12:01, I have to get ready to put a story up. Like I'm going to drink this champagne, I'm going to kiss you, and then I'm going to write a story about Dana Holgerson leaving at 12:01 a.m. New
Well, no,
Year's Day.
don't forget it had to be 101 because he was in Houston. It had to be
Oh yeah.
actually an hour behind. Um, you may not remember this, Chris. I was on the way to the game. I flew into Orlando the day before, maybe 2 days before the game, and right before I got in the plane, I talked to somebody and it was like, "Hey, this is his last game." And like all the all the clues before that were kind of, I mean, they remember they had a pretty contentious contract thing, I guess, for 2 years. Um, and people just kind of said, "Listen, do not be surprised." And I was like, "What?" And I think I might have shot you a text or whatever. And, and then I got in a plane for 2.5 hours. Probably wasn't good for your nerve. And then by the time that game was over, you could tell, like everybody I talked to before the game in the press box on the sideline was like, "Yeah, man, he's cut off communication with the university, like the coaching staff who needs new contracts. So we have no idea what's going to happen to them, just so on and so forth." And by the time that game was over, it was pretty clear to me, like I was already working on where things stand, why they were mad at each other, and basically how Major Applewhite, Chris, was the cog. Were they going to fire Major Applewhite at Houston? Believe it or not, like that's not something that happens today, right? But that was the guy that, and if they get rid of him, it's going to be Dana. And like it wasn't long. Like they fired Applewhite maybe a day or two before West Virginia played, and then from there just weren't many people left. One was Rich Rodriguez, and there was just a reservation to do that I think a lot of the people believed in that the same time, the same way they do now. Maybe the maybe it wasn't as influential as it is now because the concept of donor support, NIL, buying players, paying players was not present. But there was still this thing about, what, it would open up some wallets, you get people back and excited. But it was like he's the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. Like he just got back into coaching after a year off. Are you sure? And it never really went anywhere, but it was basically just fickle. And Tony Gibson had a really impressive plan and interview, is what people had told me before, made some promises about his coaching staff. Um, but it was always going to be Brown, it seemed like. Just Fickle was maybe too elusive at that point. People thought he had his job on the Ohio State job or certainly a Big Ten job. And it just all funneled back to Brown. That was easy, Chris. Like, that was easy. Like there was some late stuff about Mike Norvell getting in. I think our last hot board update might have included there was some tire kicking going on with the Memphis coach at the time, and it just never moved off of Brown.
I I'm vaguely remembering, and I think I don't know if this is a message board rumor, but wasn't it Fickle was the one that it was like, hey, he's not happy because there's not a good Catholic school in Morgantown or something like that? Was
That was a
that was what?
reservation. I think it's just the community and the way that he wanted his life and his family to be framed around where they were working or where they plan on spending a while was a big thing. And then I wrote about this maybe 2 years ago. There have been frustrations from people who were in or around the university and the athletic department that was a hang up or a hindrance before. And let's just say that you really want a football coach. And if something like that is in the way, like well, there's no private school, private Catholic school. I'm not saying you have to go out and build one, but there was just this kind of a bummer attitude about some people at the university and around the university in the community that the Catholic school, the private school, hadn't been built, hadn't popped up. Like, and that's not to say that you had to have that school or you had to use university dollars or taxpayer dollars to build a Catholic school, but there wasn't a there was nothing engineering, literally, I guess, about football that it just brought in all this interest to do great things. It could build cool stuff around football, but it didn't uplift the city, the town, the community like it had before, and it just wasn't an attraction. And like could it have been if you could replace Catholic school with like amusement park, but whatever, something like that. But like there wasn't a thing that you built out of football around town to make it a unique place, an attraction, and that football runs so hot here for so long, 17 years ago. But what had happened? How was Morgantown better? How was the university better? It happened for a little bit for sure, but then just people are familiar with the plight of the university in the past 2 years, layoffs, academics, programs offered, things like that. But where was football again to help it? It wasn't there. And you could rack up, I don't know, 10 wins, 11 wins, 12 wins a year, then your enrollment goes up. There's more money. You could build stuff. And then all of a sudden, you got a lot of people looking at your community and you can offer new attractions. And I don't know, like do you pop in a Trader Joe's somewhere, right? Just like there was none of that. Like Morgantown was just kind of stagnant in football in general, and it couldn't the good things about a place that had good stuff before couldn't push back and couldn't stop a slide or a slip or a dip or a drop. And that kind of bummed people out for a while around here too. And then there was just a lot of change in the university too, like a lot of change in the university.
So they end up on it. Wait, I wanted to go back. I'm gonna go back like 2 weeks because I didn't have this on my list of stories to tell, but you got me thinking when you mentioned that, right as soon as you got down to the bowl game, it was like, hey, this is Dana's last game. Do you remember that his son, Logan, had privately committed to play football at West Virginia? And not only that, what I'm looking back right now on December 15th, was that 2 weeks before the bowl game, week and a half before the bowl game? Um, he had reached out to me. We made him an edit. Maybe we'll put this as the front page picture for this podcast. It is a Logan Holgerson in a WVU camp shirt of a picture I took of him at camp with the staying home logo behind him with a mark at Morgantown. Committed class of 2019 QB. Let's go Mountaineers. Um, good kid again. Not was a kid then, now a grown man. But he's messaged me, and I guess after 6 years, it's okay if I share this a little bit. But he was like, "Hey man, I'll tell you when I'm getting ready to go public. It's going to go right after the bowl game." And then messaged me like a week into January. I was like, "Hey, that really was the plan when I told you that a month ago. I didn't want you to think it was false. Thanks for everything. Real nice guy, real nice of him to send that message." But just got a good laugh out of that because I completely forgot that story. Still, you started telling the bowl game stuff.
Yeah. I'll try to see if I can find the text messages. I'll see if I can find it. Here's a message from somebody that, again, a name you know, Chris. Athletics is a vehicle that can move WVU forward. Take the private high school. It doesn't just attract better coaches, it attracts better doctors, better faculty, etc. You can't have that happen overnight. But knowing it was a hang up for Fickle had people, um, knowing it was a hang up for Luke, if people had said afterwards, this hurt us once, it won't hurt us again, then 4 years later, that school could have been up there with anybody else. That's the type of thinking and action that you have to have unless you're just going to hope and wish for great things. They're not great at either one of them right now. So that's again, like I'm not making that up. That was from somebody a couple of years ago about like, oh man, just had a chance to do something or to respond to rejection or something. Again, doesn't have to be a private high school, but something that attracts people. Come look at us. Like, here's something that we did that's great because it's a destination and not a settlement or anything like that, too. Can I start with a good story?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna be forever ever grateful to Brown. And this is not like the brown nosing pandering part of this, but um when COVID happened, because that was scary, man. Like I didn't know I was gonna have a job. And like about 3 or 4 weeks into it, we had a meeting, like an all hands meeting on Slack. And I don't know if you were on that side of it, because I don't know if people know this, but like I work for CBS and you own the site. So we're not even like at the same Christmas party. But there was a Slack about, hey, we have an important all hands meeting. And it was just like how things were gonna work. No furloughs, no layoffs, anything like that. But it was really nervous. So Brown did a great thing, well, a couple of great things, I think, at that time. He did a lot of Zooms, which was good for like TV because they didn't have spring football, for example. But how do you fill your TV broadcasts or whatever? But you get like some clips of the head coach talking and use some B-roll that you have. So that was good. But he made sure he was available, even though there was nothing going on, Chris. And he took time out of his day, maybe even days, to do sit downs, one-on-ones on Zoom from his home, just to talk to players and everything like that, or talk to reporters and all that. Didn't have to, but he knew we needed content and he wanted to keep his football program, which, I think that they thought they were going someplace after going 5-7, which is fine. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Like we talked about how Rodriguez should be obnoxious in the promotion right now. Rent the plane, Rick Trick at crib, so on and so forth. Which isn't going to happen, unfortunately, Chris. I know you were ready to set your YouTube TV for Rick Trick at cribs.
Oh yeah.
So in our little our Zoom, I don't know, half an hour one day, he just asked like how things were going, just like the job or whatever. And I was just like, we're trying to be creative and this and that. And at that time, Tom Herman was coaching Texas. And Tom Herman had told the Texas 24/7 site he would do like an AMA, ask me anything. Like it was that day it popped into like our Slack or we get like a spreadsheet of different ideas to borrow from other people or just news that's going on in our network. And I said, oh, it's going great. We're trying to be creative. I said, hey, by the way, Tom Herman's doing a Q&A. When are you gonna do it with us? Just throwaway flippant line. And that stuck with him, Chris. And he was like, oh, wait a minute. And he got back in touch with me through somebody else and set that up. And then he took questions for like we had a thread about ask Neal Brown anything. And we asked like our readers got a chance to ask him questions during a time where like it was a blackout.
Yeah.
And he did like I would say like an hour and a half with Bud Elliott and just took questions from that people had submitted and answered about where his favorite place to recruit was, what he likes about Morgantown, just anything about what people want to know about a guy they were just getting to know. Absolutely did not have to do that. And part of me, I'm guilty here. I was like, man, he's just trying to butter up the media. He was like that all 6 years, man. Like you could say he got into like testy exchanges. Man, that is nothing. Like sometimes you ask dumb questions, you get dumb answers. Sometimes you ask a question where a guy's in a bad mood, you're going to get an answer reflective of that mood. He was absolutely not abnormal about that. Like he was pretty ordinary, and like sometimes you thought you might get a rise out of him, and you never did. But I always go back to that. He did not have to do it, and he did. And he took a throwaway line by me, and gave us something that nobody else had. Like nobody else had that, Chris. Like apart from Texas, but like other people grew to do that too. And then he always met in the summer with us and things like that, which leads to a thing about he was really in control of the messaging in his program. Sometimes that wasn't the best. Sometimes it ebbed really high. We had great access and we could talk to players. Sometimes it was very restrictive, and I have my own thoughts and opinions about that. But at the core, cannot, will not criticize him just based on I owe him that much. Like that was something he didn't have to do, and I'll never forget that about him.
And I think I'm wondering, did that spawn the switch for WVU to kind of send out the video files? Wasn't that during COVID when he started doing that and they were sent out?
Yep.
And I think that has, I don't know if it was the plan all along or it's what did Bob Ross say? A happy accident. There's a little happy accident over here. Because I think that them getting those videos out to the other outlets, to us, to our, competitors and everything else, just getting them to everybody. I think that helps spread their message and gets their photos out there, gets their pictures out there, gets their message, their program out there more than would have if they kept that video to themselves. So I think the fact that they kind of took that and ran with it, and they don't do that everywhere else. Like that
No.
doesn't happen. Like sharing that video for other people to put up. And I think it's really smart and I think it helps build your brand. So again, I don't know if that was the plan from the get-go or just a happy accident, but that was good. Mike, do you want to hear a little side story on that interview with Bud Elliott and Neal Brown?
How about the one that I'm still mad about? You want to tell that one? We probably
Was
don't
that
want
is
to
it
tell that
maybe it's
one.
the same one where I think it was supposed to be he was supposed to go on Josh Pate's show and like
Yeah.
right before like the day of that I think like they're trying to set up the call and like CBS is just like they call me like, oh yeah, Josh is on vacation. What are you
JP's
talking
the
about?
beach. Yeah.
And I was like, are you and I called somebody at the network that has been around since before you had come around, before CBS had bought 24/7, back when, Shannon was still there and it was like I don't even my paychecks came from like Shannon's LLC or something like that, that long. I called him and I lost it. Like I just was like, this is a once in a like not lifetime kind of thing, but this is something that no one else is getting. We they set this up. Mike worked so hard to get this done, and then you guys just leave us hanging like this. Like, and they're like, oh, we got Bud Elliott, whatever. And Bud obviously does a great job and does all the thing, and I think they did a really nice job together. But man, that was I had to call back and apologize later because it
All
was
right, this is not the
not
one I was still mad about. Okay,
it
I'm
was
glad you
not
are.
pretty. No, go ahead.
Okay,
What's the one you're still mad about?
no, I can't tell that
Oh,
story.
okay. Okay. Don't tell
Pate
that
was at
story
the
then.
beach. He was gonna do it too. He's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'll do it," but I'm at the beach, and I was like, "Oh no!" And again, this goes back to Brown. I could have done it, Chris. You and I could have done it. He did not want it to be an ear sports thing. He's like, "I
Right.
have no problem doing something 24/7, but like, I don't. It would look strange if I favored you all. Like a
Yes.
24/7 offered me a chance to do this, and I was like, fine. And I don't know. We can. There's a whole lot of stuff we can clip, Chris. Like your Logan Holgerson thing, my news story about this is the end for Dana Holgerson, which caught a ton of people off guard. I think even at that time, the Q&A with Brown, which again was really like I went back and I flicked through it about 10 days ago, and I was like, huh. And to your point, like, yeah, you don't do this other places. Like I've been trying to go back and watch Rich press conferences after games and wins and losses. And like that's hard to do because just the sports information staff and stuff. But like here's one reason that Jeremiah Johnson was a name for us, Chris. Like I read some stuff and then people said that like Rodriguez just couldn't, and the Jack State staff didn't have enough nice things to say about Louisiana Tech. They weren't very good this year, but their defense was one of the worst in the country to the best in the Conference USA this year. And I was just trying to find things before and after the game, and you couldn't find it. Like you had to go to I think they call them newspapers, Chris, which is hard to get behind their paywalls now too. Paywalls, what a model. That's not going to
Yeah.
work.
Get out of here.
Um, so, but like it was hard to do it to your point. But and ultimately, you do find things where Rich says that they got out coached and that Louisiana Tech was better and that Jacksonville State got lucky. You can't find that stuff everywhere. But West Virginia, just Google like an assistant coach or go to YouTube search an assistant coach. There is a volume of like Chad Scott, Jordan Leslie slash Jeff Koons interviews, Neal Brown interviews, because there's a lot of people who just take them, like they aggregate the content, they share it, but it's out there. Like West Virginia makes it available too, so you don't find that in a lot of schools. You're right.
I think it's pretty smart.
Um,
Um, Good. I was about to say, speaking of assistant coaches, I originally was going to try to go on a timeline here where after Neil Brown was hired, because they had a little bit of a story that I was thinking about the other day with the assistant coaches. Um, when Neil Brown was putting his coaching staff together and we started hearing names, and I still remember, I won't say who, but it was multiple. It wasn't just one. It was like four or five of them. Like, hey, this guy might be, an option. One quick DM through Twitter to said potential assistant coach. Hey, are you literally just me? Hey, are you coming up to West Virginia to be an assistant coach? Within 5 minutes. Yep. I'm driving up now. Yep. I'll fly there tomorrow. There's like five assistant coaches, four or five assistant coaches from that first Neil Brown staff that just answered right away. Um, that doesn't work like very often at all, but was like hitting it like an 80% clip for the Neal Brown era coaching staff. I don't know if that says that they're just nice guys or, we're making their first move from a G5 school up to a P4 school and weren't prepared for what's coming. But yeah, that was interesting.
Oh, seamless transition here. So back when plane tracking was actually a thing, which I guess it is again now too. I'm never gonna live this one down, Chris.
What's old is new again, bud.
So
That's
so
all right.
we had a pretty good way. I don't want to give it away, but we had a pretty good way of knowing who was traveling and who was going to be part of the staff. But also, like we did the journalism work too. Um, and I think what you're talking about, I think that rattled Brown a little bit. Understandable. And again, he wants to be in control of things. But there was one person who absolutely was going to come and be a part of the football staff, and then got here and was like, and it didn't work, and wasn't a part of the staff. But that looked the way it looked. And I think then it became kind of a thing where Brown really wanted to be in control of who could talk and who couldn't to the media. And like for example, you get to talk to assistant coaches, not coordinators, but like your eight other assistant coaches twice a year, once in the spring, once in the preseason, and that's it. Um, Chris, that bugs those coaches. That this is how they promote their careers. They get in well with reporters. They get stories out about how the defensive line, the receivers, the tight ends, the cornerbacks are doing throughout the season. Um, you can ask Chad Scott, hey man, so and so at receivers having a great year, but you'd probably rather ask Bilal Marshall. You could say, hey, this defensive lineman's having a great year, and Leslie or Coons can give you an answer, but AJ Jackson probably should be talking about that. And that's a strange thing I think for some people, but I can tell you multiple times that like it is not unusual for reporters to get phone numbers for coaches. It's not. Personally, for me, like one, I just don't like to surprise people with stories. I think there's a way around it. So whether it's Ren Baker, it's Neal Brown, it's Darren DeVries, it's whatever, any assistant coach. If I meet him the first time, hey man, can we change cell phone numbers? Because I don't want to surprise you if something happens. If I have a question, if this player is injured or is off the team and I'm gonna write a story about it, I'd like to give you a heads up so you're not dealing with it. But also, if I get something wrong, you want to yell at me, you want to tell me something that's maybe here, fair is fair, right? That's part of the game. Not unusual, man. Like just multiple sports coaches, staffs through the years, no problem. Chris, like multiple coaches told me they couldn't give me their cell phone number, which felt strange to me. And I was like, that's strange. And I never really followed up, but I know that it came from the top and they weren't supposed to talk to us. And I know this because those coaches DM'd me and said, here's my personal cell phone number if you need anything. Which fine, like that's the workaround, but like that was strange, I think sometimes too. And I think that probably bugs some people because it's very hard as an assistant coach to get like organic support. You can get it in the industry, but like man, if you're going to the football convention, everybody's going out there to look for jobs. And if you don't have advantages, if you don't have some buzz that someone else read about or wrote about, um, or even saw like a clip or heard an interview or something like that, that second level is tough. And just think about us, Chris, when we're looking into assistant coaches, what are we doing? We're Googling names, we're doing searches, we're trying to find what's this guy like? What's the feature that the paper in Anniston, Alabama has written about this receivers coach that shows me what Ryan Garrett's been like. If I look down at the paper in Ruston, Louisiana, and I want to learn about Jeremiah Johnson, all right, well, he's a defensive coordinator. That's fine. But if he's bringing his cornerbacks coach here, I want to learn about him. There's a great interview about him. Wow, he's dynamic. He's personable. and you didn't get a lot of that here. And I know that bothered people. I'm just telling you, I know it did. But that also came from the top. I know that because, and I think I've shared this, like the first time I met Brown, same thing. Hey man, can we change cell phones, exchange cell phone numbers? If you need something, let me know. And that's the other thing too. Like coaches and reporters do talk, like not just behind a microphone sometimes. You know, hey, how'd things go? Hey, we're gonna do this, or hey man, I didn't like what you wrote. Never for me, right? But it does happen. So, and like the answer was, well, you know, I got this one from Lexington, and this one's from Troy. I got to give it back, and I have my one from Lubbock, and I was like, hey man, that's cool. I love a good Galaxy, but like, I don't want your phone, just your number. Chris, you know how many times I talked to Neal Brown on the phone in 6 years? Once. And that was when he took the phone from someone that was in the room with him and just wanted to like answer a question I had. Because I called and said, hey, I have a question about this. And he happened to be in the room. And the person said, hey, let me ask him. He's right here. But like there just wasn't that access, that back and forth between things too. And I don't think we're at a shortage of information, but it's kind of how he ran things. He was very, very buttoned up's negative, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
just control. I think, you know, he tries to control what he controls. Should that have been his thing? I don't know. But that was what he thought he could control. Would he do it
Did
over, do it
that
differently?
change then in the spring, right? Because that's like when he first got there. Because I remember this base surprised some people, but I was there when they introduced the coaches, like after signing day in that February, after a month or so after Neal Brown had been hired,
We had a
and I
luncheon.
was in the lunch. I was at the media event with you and the other reporters, and they set up the old school style scrum with an assistant coach here in this in row one over on the right and row three on the left and all over the room and the good old days of being able to just walk up and ask your own questions. Was that the last time that happened? Like, because I mean, I can't remember my mind. I'm getting old too. Like, I can't remember when it ended, but it wasn't long after
It
or was
was
it already switched over where it was just, hey, you get to talk to two people and it's in front of everybody and everybody asks the same questions?
Lou.
No.
COVID, man. Remember this when people got mad
Yeah.
at us because we said they would never change back because they don't have to. People were mad at
Right.
us for that. No, come on. Why would, and that it's never gone back.
Why would
So
we
like
ever do that? We know
the last
why.
time I can remember the luncheon was was before the 2019 as after the change, the first spring football. Obviously not the second year because they were COVID. They barely got spring football going that year. Um, Actually, I don't think they might have had it before that second one because he was new to the staff. Probably had it the second year, but I don't remember it after that for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Vic Koenig, the first luncheon, the getting to know you coaching luncheon, same thing. I'm asking for cell phones for the head coach for the assistant coaches. He goes, hold on. He grabs his phone and he has a post-it note on the back of the phone with his number on it. Because he didn't know what a cell phone number was. It was a WVU number. He had no idea.
Yeah.
But like this is the truth. He had to take his cell phone, turn it backwards like this, and on the back was a post-it note with his cell phone number on it. And he goes, "Here, write it down." So I did get to use that phone number, Chris. More than
Well,
only twice,
Mike,
I
we're gonna have
think.
to
But
put like a warning label on this podcast now for the WV fans because that topic comes up and everything's off the rails now.
oh boy, that's I don't know. Whew.
We have to have a separate podcast just for that. The
Am I
whole
allowed to talk about that one? I'm not sure.
we're gonna set up just a solo pod of you discussing that situation and the FOIA nonsense surrounding it. We'll just give you an hour. I'll just clear the floor, let you go for an hour. Ugh. All
Not
right,
doing it.
fast forward.
I can tell you some things about the Koenig thing and like that through the years that investigation has been shared to me, read to me in different capacities, and like it's such a cop out, just such a cop out what they did and why they did it and all that. But this is probably not the forum for that.
Um, fast forward a little bit. We may be getting to my first negative story, as I think now we're going to get into, unless there was something from that first spring that you could think of, but as I was getting ready to turn into the first recruiting camp story, which is a doozy
Yeah,
and a half. Um, First recruiting camp, Mike. I don't think you were there for the very. Were you there for the very first one? You weren't in the. weight room when this incident happened. Somebody else was,
You
and
told me about this. I remember this, but yeah, I was in the queue. I was not yet I had sent my letter of application for a recruiting guy, but I had not been accepted or
okay.
not on my graduate level courses or anything. So
So very, 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 very first ever Neal Brown recruiting camp at West Virginia. I think I started it off by posting a picture of Neal Brown, who showed up 2.5 hours before registration had even begun and was greeting players out by the gate as they entered, um, which was a great first start. And a lot of people were excited about it. Go in, go through, start going through camp about, I don't know, halfway through. Um, Thunderstorms roll in. Rain, they'll play through it. Lightning, nope, nope, nope. Got to get inside. And it was pretty bad. And so they sent everybody inside. They were like, hey, what we're going to do here is we're going to split you guys into groups. We're going to take the recruits um, into the facilities and we're going to show you the weight room, the locker room. We're going to take you on a tour. We're going to use this as essentially a recruiting trip now, which is a great way to pass time. Very smart. So myself and I'll leave names out of here, but another writer for another a competing site that we often spend time together at recruiting camps are standing there like, oh, we're just going to get rained on. Then we get the invite from one of the coaches. Hey, just come on in here, stand in the weight room, wait out the storm. Like, that's really kind of you. Thank you. I'd rather not walk back to the car and all that stuff. So we go in there. It's me, the other writer, and two older gentlemen standing there who happen to be the father of quarterback Garrett Green and the father of wide receiver Reese Smith. The two very first two commitments for Neal Brown once he arrived at OVU. We just get to chatting. They're already committed. Like we're not trying to get any scoop on anything going on. I'm talking baseball with Garrett's dad and driving from Florida and how long it is, and telling stories about. He's telling me stories about baseball. I'm telling him stories about driving up from Florida to West Virginia as a kid because he was talking about how long of a drive it was, and I was like, "Yep, did the same trip when I was a kid." And out of nowhere, right in front of them, somebody just comes out, staffer, will say, screaming, "What are you guys doing?" Talking to them. What did I talk to you about? Hey, and I kind of like smiled, like nervous. Hey, what's up? No, man, nothing. And just starts cussing me out up and down, just screaming at me incessantly, screaming at the other writer incessantly, just yelling at us. And we're like, wait, is this really like we're just kind of caught off guard? Can't believe it's actually happening. The very first camp ever. And we're like, this is going to be bad for the next few years. If we're getting off on this wrong foot, 2 hours in the first camp. And I can't believe that they're doing this right in front of two recruits' parents that they really want. It went on for several minutes and then eventually kind of just tapered off and the staffer just walked away. And the parents of Green and Smith were just like, wow, okay. And then just kind of walked away to avoid any further. The staffer was upset because we were talking to Green and Smith's parents, even though we weren't talking about recruiting or football at all. Um, And I was like, well, this is going to be a long, however many years that Neal Brown is here. My focus is on recruiting. And that was a recruiting staffer just cussing me up and down for, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes. But the good news is he cussed out my main competition as well. So at least he won't have anything either.
but they got the
And they,
commitment.
yeah. And then, yeah, Reese and Garrett ended up staying committed. Something that their parents joked about a lot over the next couple years. The very next camp, I think it was like 2 days later, 3 days later, like nothing had ever happened. Hey, Chris, how's it going? Da 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 da. Other people on the staff, somebody joked with me like, "Yeah, I heard about what happened the other day." Like, yeah, don't worry about it. Just forget about it. And no one, I mean, people have joked with me up until all the way through this past summer, still joking about it several years later about what happened. And I don't know, like that was wild. That like I was really nervous there for a bit because I was like, this is it, man. Like my job is information. My job, my focus mostly is recruiting, and here I am just being reamed like that, and this could be the end. And I was more nervous that they were going to start imposing camp limits again. Like the
Oh yeah, there
early
was
days of early days of covering camp, Mike, like the 2013, 12, 13, they were unclear on what we like, this was more of a nervous about the rules kind of thing than a hey, we don't want you to see anything. But they would not let us on the field. They would not let us around anything. We had to sit up in the stands where the parents were. We couldn't get times, we couldn't get numbers, we couldn't get names, we couldn't get anything. And they said it was per NCAA rules. Again, I think that was being more cautious than anything, but I was like, we're going back to that. This is what's going to happen now. They're going to stick us in the stands. It's going to be terrible. And to be quite honest, it went the exact opposite way, and everything worked out just fine in that regard.
do you ever get the sense that they weren't quite ready for it, never really got comfortable with like a lot of attention? Like the fishbowl was much not that sure it's the right. There are just a lot more eyeballs, a lot more attention.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I do think there was some nerves because one of the things said to me was, you are not going to F this up for us. Like, again, legitimately thinking that they were like, do you think the NCAA cares that, you know, a parent is just chatting about baseball with a recruiting writer? Like, they don't care. That's
A
not
big
gonna,
league baseball player, a guy
yeah,
who
a
probably knows
major
his
league
way around
baseball
the
player
media.
is talking.
Uh,
I don't
yeah,
know.
I just that and like with their access stuff, which ebbed and flowed, and this year I was very complimentary of their access in the preseason. I thought that it was smart of them. They made players available that were really good in the summertime. You got good access to the practice, and I don't mind that, but just give me the rules, and the rules were kind of loose. But like there were times this year where like I wrote stuff that I did not think was against the rules, and heard about it, like, hey, why? We'd let you in do that. We don't want to cut off your access. And then like when the Garrett Green injury in the scrimmage before the Penn State game this year, asked around about it, and it started to be like, boy, you don't want to lose access, do you? Get out of here. Like part of the job. Like so, I mean, and ultimately, how big of the deal was it? He didn't miss any game time, but he missed practice time the week before the game. Is that why they could snap the ball the first game? I don't know. Um, but I felt like you could ask them questions sometimes, and if they didn't, maybe they might not have liked it, but it just felt like they had a plan, but they had a lot of people who were running the plan. It just had like all these different personalities. But and there are people, Chris, that were here for 6 years I never ever once spoke to. So they were there in their roles and they weren't obsessed with it too. But there was one person that Brown was kind of and people on the board I know this story and people have heard about it too. But early on, Brown had his people and like they were out trying to raise money, and it was one of those things about, hey, get in this while you can, because if this goes well, it won't be here long, but we want to leave it in a good place. Because they really thought they were going to hit the ground running here. And like that turned people off sometimes too. I'm not sure how many people it was, but I've heard like consistently one or two people just, hey, he's on the way up. Help him take West Virginia on the way up with him. And in one regard, that's a good idea, not the best pitch, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think that West Virginia likes the idea that that's a springboard, and that might have been until it was no longer the case too. But that was certainly a strange one there. Um, Let me save that one too. I don't
To
know.
note your comment about the guy's been here for 6 years, that you're talking about, the staffer I'm talking about, not around very long. Certainly not around the program the last couple of years.
Yeah,
So
that's not a negative for this person. Like I don't know this person, important person, but his job was not to deal with the media. But I just never ever spoke to that person, which is a weird thing to be around that long and not write a story about or anything like that. But you couldn't do stories about stuff like that. Like if you wanted to do something on like another like nutrition or whatever, it's very hard to get access to stuff like that. You could do it, but I mean, hoops you got to jump through. That's difficult too. But I think sometimes too, when there's a lot of people who want to do stuff, you have to say no sometimes too. But it's okay to say yes, I believe. Chris, I live not far from the stadium. Um, I like to run. I have a dog that likes to run. So sometimes my loop will take me out of my neighborhood, and then if you're familiar with the layout of the football
right
stadium,
through the middle of the practice field. Oh,
right above it. And like there's also when you go down, you loop back. There's a road in between the practice field. It's a regular road that goes down toward the practice facility. Up, cut out of the hillside, in between that road and the top, like the law school parking lot, is like a gravelish, dirtish road, and that's part of my loop. So one time I did not have the dog. I was running by myself. I can't remember if I had the dog or not. It wouldn't have been. So I came back and I was running back, and I had my earbuds in and I was looking at my phone and I stopped and I was just messing with my phone trying to put my time in on my Strava and I had my earbuds in and didn't hear anything. And I could tell the people like over to my left in the tower that overlooks the football field, the practice field. I didn't know anything. So I continue on my loop and then I had to double back to go up the parking lot through the gate back to my neighborhood. And I was greeted by people who asked me what I was doing. That conversation did not go well for them. I felt great. Um, but that was the level of concern is that you had people who were on like a tower who wanted to know what I was doing. And I was like, well, what's the line from Big Lebowski? Obviously, you're not a golfer.
Yeah.
I was running. I had shoes and earbuds, and I was just running. But the next time I came through, I was with my dog. My dog was going crazy, and they just kind of waved at me from the top up there too. Now, is it those two being good at their job? Was that orders from on high? Literally, I don't know. But to me, that always stuck in my head. Like, what are we worried about here? Like, I'm not going to be. I'm a sports writer, right? I'm not going to be camped out in sight. Listen, if I'm going to spy on practice, I'm going to do it from a place you can't even see me. I promise, right? I'm not going to do it in plain sight too. So that was a strange one to me for sure. Like, what are we worried about? And then also, like Brown was like I've been over this before too. When they have open practices, I would go and I was trying to get away from people a little bit, just because like I want to like pay attention and look at stuff and not have to worry about like not be able to hear things, whatever. And like one time I was sitting by myself and a guy came over and said I had to leave, and I was like, no, I don't. He goes, no, you can't be here. I'm like, why? He goes, because you're writing down everything. I was like, that's what reporters do, right? I'm writing down what I'm watching. We're allowed to cover practice, like it's an open practice to the public. And that guy went and got somebody. And again, is that Neal Brown's his edict? I don't think so, but probably something from up top saying, "Hey, be vigilant because we think Pitt, Penn State, and Pitt, Penn State, and Duquesne are probably here today." Remember that when he said
Yep.
that like at a news
Hmm.
conference that probably all three schools were at your open practice, and he just kind of like, "Ugh, I hate having open practices because all of our schools are here." I guess I was the Pitt, Penn State, Duquesne conduit for him that day. It was strange, but like, yeah, asked me to leave or at least move on to another section. I was like, well, I'm not leaving, but like, we can call somebody over here and talk about this. He's like, I've been doing this for 7 years. I don't know who you are. And I was like, I've been doing this for 20 years. Not that like I'm bigger than you or better than you, but like I'm just blending in the best I can. Just a strange, a
Yeah.
strange protection of details, I think sometimes.
Let's say I'm about to tell a similar story, but before I do, let's preface it by saying I don't think this is wildly unique to Neal Brown. At times, maybe it feels like it's a little more stringent than others, but head coaches, especially in college football, are paranoid by nature. They believe, I mean, that's why you see so
Yeah.
many coaches shutting off media access, shutting off practices, all that stuff. But there was a camp, a recruiting camp. I'm up there. I get there early. I like to get there early because the camp will start at 12. But how that works is at 12 o'clock, that's when they start the first group to go through testing. So guys are arriving at 11, 10, whatever, starting to get in there, to get in line, to get registered. And so I like to get there because that's when I can see the guys walk in and try to get some information on them. And it also offers me an opportunity to talk to people if nothing else is going on. Except to this day that I'm about to tell, there was a practice like going on, like a walkthrough type practice for West Virginia. And I walk in and I'm there. I got my backpack on, got my laptop in the back just in case of a breaking story, got my camera over my shoulders wrapped around my neck. Walk in. I don't think I had walked down the steps. I don't think I had gotten down to the bottom yet before somebody greeted me and told me that I would have to, they said, you know, I know exactly, they knew exactly who I was. I knew who they were. Said, hey, like, obviously you can be here, but the camera's got to go. You know, no pictures. You can't, can you at least put it in your backpack? Can you take it out of here? And then they're like, don't talk about it. Don't write about it. And I just remember laughing because I was like, okay, I won't, you know, obviously I don't have a problem with that. I'm not trying to take pictures of what's going on here. And I was like, what the heck are you guys doing? You look out there and God, was it JT Daniels? I think it was JT Daniels. And he had a towel instead of a football. That was because the rules said they were not allowed to have a football that you would run plays with or throw or whatever. And so they would go out there and run plays with the handing off a towel, a wrapped up towel, like you would find like, you know, set up for decoration. It's like is ridiculous. I think the next year, NCAA changed the rules and it's just open practice all the time, whatever you want. But um, yeah, to that point, just not being able to do that because there was another time. What was it? Was it Eddie V that I think was in like a boot and he was just walking around camp and we saw, I mean, he's out in public walking out like on the 50-yard line in front of 200 campers, a handful of media people and, 400 parents in the stands. And it's like, no, no, don't even mention that. Don't look at him. Don't mention it. Don't take a picture of it. Nothing. It was like okay, all right.
So some number of years ago, I think I worked maybe at the newspaper at the time. Yeah, it would have been before I worked for you guys. Will Greer visited campus, and that was a big name just in college football because of what happened his time at Florida, the banned substance suspension, which is always kind of a weird thing. Where's he going to land? This and that. And I had heard that he was going to be visiting West Virginia, and West Virginia couldn't comment on that or anything. We were due at we had it might have been like a pre-spring luncheon or a news conference or something there, but we were in the practice building that in the Pushkar Center that day. And here's just the thing, Chris, like a journalism thing. I always tell students this when I was teaching. I would never ever enter, or I would try to never ever enter and leave the same route because now you can't. You only have one point of entry and one point of exit. But back then it was open a little bit. You could take meandering ways, but you never know who you're going to see. And also, if you have a pattern, you can be avoided, right? So like, oh shoot, here comes Mike. All right. Well, that person is just not be available that day. But it was just a way to see different people and say hello and just you see them once or whatever. Just it's a small thing. Just don't take the same route every time. Otherwise, you're going to get the same results. So I went a different way, and I stopped and I talked to somebody, and then very very clearly, Will Greer and at least two offensive coaches walked by me, and I was like, okay. And like for me, it was absolutely intentional. It was intentional. Because I'd heard about it and then I happened to be in the right place at the right time and like here he comes down the hallway and it's very intentional. I was like, I have to write about this. And they had no problem with that. That was not quite the same the past 6 years. Now, did they have a Will Greer level player on campus? Probably not. Did I know those guys as well as I like the Holgerson people probably knew how to like mess with me a little bit, or I would take the bait. I could be manipulated, right? Probably a little bit better that way too. But that's why I think relationships with reporters are kind of important sometimes too, because not that we can be tricked, but like you know how someone's going to act and react. Yeah. If you parade a four-star transfer or quarterback in front of me, I'm probably going to take the bait on that too. But that stuff was fleeting. But like also, it's hard to move around that building. Have you been in there recently?
Not recently. No, you want to tell me? Okay, I got two sidetrack stories, but the first one was the very first time I ever did anything for this site, long before I ever even owned it, long before you came over. There, the SID, I'll check again. It was like, I want to meet you. I just want to meet you, introduce myself as Mike Montoro. I just want to introduce myself, just feel you out. Like, because I'm just coming in random, totally random. Nobody knows who I am, what I've done before. And I'm coming in and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll swing by. And so I show up to the facility for the very first time, my first time in the facility. I walk in there and I just kind of start wandering around because I'm not sure entirely where to find his office. And I'm in
I
the
know this
wrong
story.
spot.
I know
And
the other
like,
side.
yeah, and like and somebody finally comes and was like, "What are you doing?" And I think, it was they probably had official visitors. I had no freaking clue. I had no clue who was there, no clue what's going on. And I'm just wandering around, and all of a sudden it was just like, "What are you doing?" This is what 2012, I think, 2011. So it's been a long time, but that was yeah. I just wandered around, but I mean I've been in there since then, of course. But
Were you asked to leave that day?
what from the building?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They
Okay.
were
I
like,
think
"Oh,
I've
you
heard
want
this
to
story
go?"
from the other side.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like Mike's not here. You're gonna have to get out of here.
Yeah, you're in the wrong. He's the Coliseum, right?
Yeah, they were like, he's
Yeah.
at the Coliseum. What are you doing? And I was like, what? I was like, I just assumed since he's the SID, like, for football that he'd be over here. They're like, no, he's at the no, get out. And it's like, oh, okay, sorry. But
Um, anything on the
uh,
coaching search?
well, oh, sorry, I had one
Or
more
do you have more
story.
stories? You have
I was
more?
gonna
Okay.
one more story, and it was gonna combine two things that you said about, assistant coaches kind of wanting. a little bit of the interviews for their attention for the work that they do. And that's
Yeah.
especially true for recruiting. Like they bust their butts on recruiting. So when they have something special happening, they want it to be known. Like it needs to be known. And I was trying to look it up as it was happening here as we were talking, but what was this last year? And there was a defensive tackle. God, I got a picture of him, and he's like hugging the coaches, and he's walking outside, and it like let me see if I can find it. Anyways, I'm in the parking lot right outside of the facility, and I'm it's in the middle of camp. Like I think camp is starting to slow down, or there's a break because I was out there and I'm typing a story. It might have been a 7-on-7 tournament, and I'm in my car, kind of parked near the front of the parking lot, up close to the building, and there's a hard knock on my window. Scares the daylights out of me. And it's an assistant coach. Hey, get up. Come here. Come over here. Okay. Walks me up over to a sidewalk, says the recruit's name. Again, I'm blanking on it right now. I'll find it and I'll post it under the story or whatever. But he says, all right, so what's going on? And I'm like, what do you mean what's going on? And he kind of turns me so that I'm now facing towards the street, towards like varsity club and everything, but facing like on that side is one of the door exits from where the recruits typically go in and out. The if you're staring at the building, the right hand side. All of a sudden, a big SUV pulls up and out pops a massive man. He's a defensive lineman, like 6'3", 295 pounds. And then, oh, I gotta go. And the assistant coach had pulled me aside, walks away and goes and greets this player. And then out comes two more coaches and they all greet him and they've all just got done showering. They camp early and showered. And oh, you want to take a picture of this right here? Oh, your camera? You have it on you right here, right now with us hugging this 5-star recruit? What a great idea, Chris. Way to be in position and on the ball. So,
That feels like a
yeah.
violation.
What? Michael?
No. Again, you can take the bait if you know, like if you have like it just you get to know people and you know how to play the game with them and all. Not even playing the game, but like we're suckers sometimes.
I
Plain and
mean,
simple, like that's it. Uh,
I'm easy. You want me to
yeah,
get pictures of a 5-star recruit walking to campus? You don't even have to play the game with me. Just tell me.
no, no. Coaching search.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna go over the plane thing again. I just think that maybe I don't. I'd like to ask this question. With the schedule, I haven't been able to actually link up with anybody of late. They've been very busy, and so have I. Did they do it on purpose? Was it an accident? Did they have no other way? But like, they really went
No,
out
at
of their
least
way.
one
Like,
flight was on purpose. You ready for that? You want me to hop right in?
let's do it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The um the last flight that went to Houston, like the last day or right before Rich Rodriguez was officially announced.
Alan Klein, Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, like that I don't want to say that was on purpose, but it was like, yeah, make sure that that's like maybe tell some people that his dad's the owner of the plane was basically, I don't know if it was going home or going to see an actual client for his actual business, not part of the coaching search at all. But the person who owns the plane, I'm told, had a pretty good laugh about that, flying to Houston right at that time and just seeing the freak out of that at that time.
People are like, it's gonna be Colin Klein. I can't believe it. I'm like, College Station's huge. Like, there's got to be an airport in College Station that's closer than Houston, right? That didn't make sense to me. I don't know why. I think it was personal. I think they were trying to make me look bad. Um, can tell you that people were not happy with our reporting, Chris. Think I told you this. Not sure why. I thought we were like a day or so behind on some stuff. Sometimes not. But I everything opened up once the airplanes became public knowledge. I mean, public knowledge. People, I mean, across the
Yeah.
internet were looking at this stuff, which I cannot believe. Like, I think, I can't vouch for how great our coverage was. People have told me we did a nice job on it, kept them up to speed and everything as best as we can. I felt like we were chasing some stuff, but sometimes we're going to be a day behind. And, um, man, when you're trying to pin down, like they talked to, I think I had heard 18 people. I think we said 12 was the number we'd heard. Try to get that stuff, and that's why sometimes it was a like day late or late in the process. Like the Brian Hartline thing. One, we wagged the dog on that one, Chris.
Yeah.
because that got a news cycle where we had no idea when he had interviewed or how serious it was. In fact, I mean, we pretty quickly, you maybe before me, I'm not sure, but both of us had found out that there was really nothing to it. But he did interview, which is
Yeah.
substantial because you're trying to figure out what type of work is West Virginia doing here, especially when it looks like they're going to land on Rich Rodriguez, which they could have gotten done, you know, in text.
Yeah.
Probably. Never mind like Zooms and phone calls and everything. He wanted to be here, and if West Virginia had the ways and means to make it happen, you do this. But like, okay, I'd still like to flesh out more of the details in the search. I intend to, but it takes some cooperation, which so far haven't been able to pin down. But um, Jeff Monken interviews. How big of a deal is that? Um, did they have the nerve to hire the Army coach? I think that's important stuff. We'll get to that. The plane thing is like when it really opened up, though, when people started saying, "Wait a minute, that plane's in Penn State, that plane is in here and there, like that plane's in going to New York, that plane is going to." Was there one going to New Orleans? I can't remember. Um,
Yeah, there was one of the days it
Somewhere in
got a little
Louisiana.
wonky on the old flight to where or whatever it's called because it was like the flight was leaving, I think it was leaving Clarksburg and was going to New Orleans, somewhere in Louisiana, and then was going to go to like Florida, like Clearwater International,
Yeah,
like
which is where Anthony
airport.
Beck lives.
Yeah, and then it was like, then all of a sudden it was, oh, now I actually just went straight to Anniston, Alabama, which is 15 minutes from Jacksonville State.
So
And
that was during a home basketball game.
yeah,
We might or might not have had a third party keeping an eye on the push car center that night. Um, Maybe, don't know. But I was also, this is what I was gonna, I mean, this is what I did too. Like, I mean, once you realize that they're hopping around this, and this is why it's important too. You can catch Ren Baker and I guess I can say the names now, like who's on his team. It was Natasha Oakes, it was Ben Murray, it was Rob Alsop. You can catch them coming back into the Coliseum. And if you can catch them coming back into the Coliseum during a basketball game, where you guys been? Like that's journalism, right? But that never happened because something did go weird with that, like that flight and the tracking and all that stuff. But again, that's when they might have been screwing with us. One person at WVU has taunted me by text since then about my plane tracking expertise, and I was like, I did not because you all sandbag us on the basketball search. Like the basketball search, it went nowhere. People could not follow the trail on that one, and that actually took work and trying to figure out. Like, and again, I'm not sure how many people did this, but Chris, we had who they were zooming with and when, and where they were visiting, but we couldn't figure out exactly where because they didn't go to places that made sense. They didn't follow the logic, right? Which is fine. They did this time, and that's when it kind of got a little bit strange. And all of a sudden, you're like, all right, uh, that means he's gonna be a Colin Clymer quarterbacks, and that means Anthony Beck Clearwater for tight ends. Okay, Rich will be the head coach, and then maybe he can get Kotelnicki be the offensive line coach. It's like, no, stop this. That's why, because sometimes you start chasing your tail, and you get it, and what do? You get all this information because you piece it together, and what does it actually mean? I don't know. That'll be strange. But the one was just kind of a throwaway flight, wasn't it?
well, I think two of them were because I think another one that got mentioned to me was the right kind of in the mix to that was like a flight to Richmond. I was like, is that
Yeah.
like a one of those like things where two guys fly to one spot to meet in a neutral spot or whatever it is? I don't know how much people do that anymore, but and I think that was again just a hey, this is this guy's business that owns the plane, and he's doing this for his business on his time.
Mhm.
If you don't mind, we're gonna borrow the plane, let him do his work. So
I admire it. Listen, I love the investigation and trying to figure things out. Like I'm all in for that, but I did not see the plane thing coming this time until it was irresistible, and you couldn't ignore it anymore beyond that. Um, I had a good story for a second. Trying to
I'll
remember
let
what
you
it
think on it. I'll tell the Brian Hartline story because yeah, that one was you're right. Like and that was I think that was the first question you asked me was when I was like, holy crap, Brian Hartline interviewed. Like no one has this. We didn't have this. Like I mean, I don't even know if we had him on the board. I was like, but I was like, he's legitimately interviewed. I've been able to confirm this with multiple people in multiple places. And your question was when? Like when did he? Because obviously, like I think I reported it on Monday afternoon or something like that. And so the question, like, if that interview happened Monday at noon, like Monday lunchtime, that's big news. If the interview happened Sunday or Saturday or whatever, like over the weekend, and they've already moved on to other guys, then it's not quite as big of a news at all. He was part of the search. He was part of the interviews, and my understanding is after the fact, pretty quickly after the fact, got a message about that, like, hey, whoa, 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 whoa. You guys are on the right track with Rich Rod. Heartline interviewed a couple days ago. Chill. And that was, I think I had to like quote tweet because you're right. Like I tweeted that Ohio State site got a hold of it. All of a sudden, every news network around was like, Ryan Hartline interviews for WVU. I had to like quote tweet, be like, hey, interview's an interview. We still don't think he's the favorite, but he did interview. And might have been too late by that. It's one of those things where you tweet something and then you go and make a second tweet afterwards and it gets 1/100th of
Never
the
happens. Yeah.
reach. Never happens.
So on the jet thing too, so I remember this before when Brown was hired. He did not visit campus and I'm pretty sure they went to go see him, but I remember when he showed up, you could stand in the terminal at Morgantown's airport, watch the plane land, see him get off. Um, Listen, there's been times before where you could do that. You could just stand in the terminal, see a plane land, see who gets on, see who gets off. No problem there. I've done that before. That's before they put a private hangar in at the airport. And like those planes go in like this place now, it's private. Like that's what you pay for that. You're not going in the regular terminal. You're not landing in front of this huge glass wall where everybody can look at you. So like here's your runway. And then like over here is your I'm doing this stuff for visual purposes, but let's just say the runway's in front of everybody, and then you come into the terminal in the middle. That's fine. But now when they land, they taxi a long way to like a remote location in a private hangar that it's hard to see, and you could probably get a good view of it, but you got to get into this like restricted access parking lot, it looks like. So I'm told. But how do you get in there? And then when you do get in there, you're parked next to like the AD's car or like, so it's going to be really hard to get away with it. But again, like, how do you get in there and how much are you doing? So I think from the future, Chris, what we're going to have to do is instead of staking it out, we're just going to have to like watch the plane land and then we're just following the car. And if that takes us to the Baker household, well, that's unfortunate. But if they all go to the Coliseum and they get out and you can see who it is, or they go to the Pushkar Center and you get out and you can see who it is, that's fine. But like Chris, we had people who were in like the Clarksburg airport because a plane, not you and I didn't ask anybody, like you and I didn't ask anybody to stake out the Pushkar Center, but like people were really invested in this about trying to get like a gotcha photo of Rich getting off a plane in Clarksburg or getting back into the Pushkar Center in Morgantown. Um, Crazy. Just like crazy. When did you believe Rich was real?
Right from the beginning. I mean, like, I knew there were, real as in done or like real as in a real candidate.
Well, let's trace it because I still have the pinch myself moment where I wake up and like, man, I had the strangest dream. Like I had too much eggnog last night. But Rich is the coach again? That couldn't be,
Yeah.
right? But like, so it's still settling in, but and now you're kind of numb to like, oh, it was always going to be like this. I don't think that was the case. I think it ended up
Yeah.
this way. I think one of the first things I wrote, one of our first hot board updates was like, they're gonna have to find a reason to come off Fisher and Rodriguez's name. I think whenever Fisher found him, or that did not go very well. Um, More don't know. Again, would love to unpack this and pick some people's brains. That's a hint if you're listening or watching, please. Um,
And you know they are.
yeah, but yeah, it's true. The rich thing, um, they never found a reason to come off that name, and like that was to me something that when someone told me that, I mean, pretty plugged into the search industry. That's when I kind of had to open my mind a little bit, like, okay, this is not going to be like a full blown, like conventional coaching search. There's a guy in the lead that's going to have to come out of the lead, and he never did.
Yeah, I still remember I was standing at Barnes and Noble getting some stocking stuffers for my kids, and you called and you're like, this, like seriously, like the very first day, you're like, Rich Rodriguez is going to be at the top of the hot board. Like this was before Neal Brown had been officially fired, and we were talking about how to set up the hot board, some names that should be on it, and you're like, I've been calling people and talking to people all morning, and Rich Rodriguez is going to be up there, like in the top group. I was like, okay, I believe you. And like,
Uh,
you were telling me the people some of the people you were talking to, and I was like, well, dang, if they're saying it and Mike's hearing it, that's man, that might be, so when you say, when did I know it was gonna be real? I knew it was a real candidate from that conversation, which I had to like sit next to the little kids train station for like 30 minutes. That ended up being a very long conversation that day. And then, but actually being hired, I mean, again, it felt like it just felt like it was trending that way the whole time. Like not like, oh, it's done. It just felt like every day that passed was like it's seeming more like a possibility and more and more. And, the Kotelnicki interview and then subsequent, hey, like I got messages that day. I was like, hey, it's not happening. Um, not long after I posted the Heartline thing, that was on Monday. I think by that point we kind of assumed that Rich Rodriguez was done, but Heartline, somebody was like, hey, that interview did not go well. And I never got clarification. Maybe I should, but did it not go well because he did a poor job or because West Virginia did a poor job selling West Virginia, or which side decided that it was a poor interview? Don't know. And right now, quite frankly, don't care. But yeah, just kind
Yeah,
of felt like it was trending that way.
I wonder how many second round of interviews they did and how many people were really invested in the second round of interviews. Like if they, let's just say, for example, like Heartline did a good job and they called him back and said, "Would you like to meet in person?" He'd be like, "No, no, thanks."
Yeah.
Because I think that there were strong indications it was going to be Rich. What was the update when I interrupted your Christmas light tour?
Oh God, that's right. You were driving the car, and I was like, as soon as I answered, you came through on the Bluetooth, and I was like, just a heads up, everybody's in the car. I don't know what you're about to say. I don't know.
Keep it PG.
I say that every time, like, you know, somebody calls and you're on the Bluetooth and everybody can hear you. I don't. My wife was like, "What do you and Mike talk about that he can't say in front of the kids?" I'm like,
Not what he says, it's how he says it, right?
yeah, I don't know.
Oh, so um, I'd like to know how many people they had second interviews with and how many people maybe backed out, or like how small that circle got pretty quickly. Clearly, they had a couple like in-person interviews and second ones because they went from 12 or 18, somewhere in there, to four, perhaps. So, do they want to do six? Do they want to keep it to five? I don't know, but they pretty much said two to five, three to five, something like that, which is what it sounds like they did. It just became really clear to me Rodriguez was going to be the guy. When the people came to his defense after that exchange of reporters after the Conference USA Championship game, and like folks I hadn't talked to, and then folks who normally would not respond to me responded to me. Um, there were some important people who were at that game, Chris. That why would they be there? Support friends, delegates, I don't know, but that was really interesting to me. And again, I might have talked myself into that, like, oh boy, this is evidence, but it might have been like a confirmation bias for me too, because perhaps they're just his friends. I mean, he mentioned a couple of the people in his news conference, but they were at that game. Um, why? Why are they there? That was curious to me. Are they going to Jacksonville, Alabama on a Friday night to watch their friend play? Yeah, maybe. Are they also like, hey, let's try to make this work? I think that maybe those people who could probably push in that direction. So that was really interesting to me. To be clear, those are not the people that I talked to. One very politely said, I'm very politely said, I'm not going to contribute to your reporting, which is fine. That's fine, man. It's better than ignoring, which, by the way, assistant coaches have done to me for years, just ignoring messages. um, some do, some don't. Um, but when some of the stuff was like, hey, because he was getting crushed that night. No one believed it. I have nothing planned coming up. I'm going to take Saturday and Sunday off. I'm going to hang out with my wife and our two dogs. When people were like, listen, man, he's being honest, which Chris seemed to me like Bob Huggins is a recycling enthusiast a little bit, which is true. Like people who are around him know that, but people who are around Rich knew that he wasn't lying, that he didn't have anything planned yet because he'd already interviewed once and he did not have a call to do a second one because who knows? Hey, go focus on the Conference USA Championship game. We'll get in touch with you afterwards. Hey, good luck on Saturday. We enjoyed this Zoom. If we decide to move forward, we'll get in touch with you. That all probably is true. But when the defenses came out like, hey man, he's being honest. And I was like, well, surely he's gonna interview. No, nothing planned. Well, he has to interview. Sure. And then it clicks. And then I gotta pick up my phone. Wait a minute, you're saying he already interviewed? Yes. And like that's when I was like, this is it. And I told my wife, and I was just because I have to like pour my head out sometimes, and you were doing Christmas lights or whatever. I had to talk to somebody. I was like, this is what happens, man. The OC at Penn State's gonna say I'm cool, I'm out where I'm at. The Tulane head coach is gonna, double up and stay put and not go anywhere. The Army coach is gonna say he's happy and is on a mission. Like these guys are gonna slowly back out because they see the writing on the wall, which is what happens. That's not like some Nostradamus thing by me. That's what happens when coaches know, because coaches know, like they know how this goes. They got agents. There's all these back channels that are pretty fluid, but also pretty packed with information too. And it just seemed like once those coaches started dropping out, there was going to be nobody left on the board, and that Rich would have his interview, and he'd probably be the guy, which is what happened.
Thoughts? We get ready to wrap as we near the end of this. We can um, get near the end of the cycle, near the end of the podcast, whatever I'm trying to say here. But your thoughts on the he's going to announce on Pat McAfee show thing? I mean,
Listen,
it was semi. I don't want to say it was semi correct because like Pat ended up bringing the show to the Coliseum later, so I don't know if there was a hiccup there or what. Like again, we didn't report that. We did not
no,
report that. Someone
we were
posted that on our
curious.
board with very curious background. Um, but
I was curious. I was curious
yeah,
because it's a thing that, like, man, okay, if you're gonna punctuate this and you're gonna kick it off a new era, this is a cool way to do it. I would have felt terrible for the Jacksonville State players. And people called me a nerd for that or whatever, but man, that would be really tough.
yeah,
I just think it would be, and like that's how it goes. And I'm sure they understand there's a pecking order and there's a food chain, and they're at one end and West Virginia's at the other. I'm sure that's true. In fact, some of those players are coming to West Virginia, so they get that. But that'd be a hard look, I think, for West Virginia to say, "Hey, man, here's our new coach. It's awesome. This is great on McAfee show." And meanwhile, the kids at Jacksonville State are like, "Man, who are we? Like, what are we?" That would have been
yeah.
tough. And if you think I'm soft, that's fine. I'll work on my hard edge. I promise. But like,
Soft edge, no
I'll
hard
work
edge
on
for
it.
Mike.
I'll work on it. But like that would be a tough thing. But it never happened. You could certainly watch that program on that, what was that, Tuesday, Chris?
Hmm.
And say,
I watched all 3 hours of it. It was not. I asked for hazard pay. I haven't gotten it yet.
but you could say that's a lot of Dan Orlovsky. And why are they always looking to the side and being like,
Well, yeah, he kept that's what I was like. I don't watch the show that often. And he's wearing his WVU shirt, which I know he doesn't wear all the time. And I was like, and he keeps like looking off camera, being like, and I'm like, oh, is he setting something up? Like he's getting ready to, oh, are we ready to kick it over to Rich Rod zooming in to announce that he's coming? So I was in. I thought it was really happening right there on the show as I was watching it.
I was kind of hoping, like, when they had the Devontae Adams trade announced, they actually, I think they did on McAfee's program where
Yeah,
he
they did it
walked
on
behind
McAfee show.
Rodgers.
Like Aaron Rodgers, yeah, just popped
What if,
behind him.
what if Rodriguez just walked behind Aaron Rodgers? That would have been great, right? Or like if he announces Orlovsky as his new quarterback coach, and that would have been awesome, right? A little
Yeah.
cross brand there. They end up getting a pretty good deal out of it too, being a Morgantown. That's the better option for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, you could see, and again, people put these together and it makes sense. Okay, McAfee showed Tuesday, bowl press conference Wednesday, basketball game Tuesday night, I think. Just check, check, check. You could do all that stuff, but
Yeah.
it didn't work out. But I mean, a conspiracy theorist might buy into that. And like I was like, okay, that would make sense. Like tidy, put it in a wrap a bow around it and get this thing done. That would have made sense to me. It didn't work out that way, but I could certainly see that being the way this falls into. Craziest thing that you heard in the coaching search?
Oh, gosh. Hmm.
A name, a thought, a whisper, a rumor. I'll give you mine.
Go ahead.
Matt Campbell.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And no, 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 no. People, no, 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 no. Let's be
No,
clear
no.
here. People did not just go, "Oh, what about Mac?" No, no, no. There were people on our board. They were like, "What the hell is wrong with you guys? Why are you not talking about Matt Campbell? That is going to be the guy. It's ridiculous. You don't have inside information. I'm leaving this site." People legitimately said that
Hey,
about Matt
Chris.
Campbell. Like,
Hey, Chris.
yeah, legit, semi.
I don't know, man. But that like that like some after the like I said, I'm trying to do the postmortem, the debriefing, and all that stuff, and it's hard. But like, and I have not gotten anybody with a wvu.edu address to talk to me yet. Um, Again, hopefully that happens. But that was a
Have you
name that
tried WVUAD at AOL.com? Have you tried that?
he seems like a Hotmail account, don't you think? Burner email. But that's a name that like people are like, hey, did you ever you got that right? And I'm like, I mean, I heard about that goofy room. Like, I think there was. I'm like, really? So that's something I will ask a question if I'm in the proper company, and I might not ever get the answer, but like, I guess Matt Campbell rolls in silence, because he was apparently like high on the UNC board, but no one ever pinned that down. It was always going to be Belichick. Okay, that's fine. Could he have slipped into Morgantown or had conversations? Don't know. There certainly is a way to have that talk without everybody knowing it, especially if boy that does like that's the craziest one that I heard that like didn't seem so crazy. There's other ones that oh like I can't even think of an off the wall one because that one's pretty good. But like the Matt Campbell one is the one you dismiss. You're like, "Psh, whatever," and it comes back around like a boomerang. You're like, why does this keep coming at me, right? And like that one did not go all the way away. I don't know how close it got. I don't even know if there's anything there, Chris. Is there a there? I'm not sure, but like I got some of that stuff on the board, and again, I'm not pat myself in the back or anything here, but I don't scroll and look at other reporting because it clouds my judgment sometimes. Like the planes. All of a sudden I'm looking at planes like, wait a minute, I didn't know this name. What? Because he's going to, I don't know, let's just say he's going to Starkville, Mississippi or whatever for some reason. Well, who's there? Then I mean, who's at Starkville, Mississippi that they're going to take, right? Nobody, right? So why am I wasting my time? I didn't waste a lot of time in the Matt Campbell stuff because I didn't think it was true. But to be honest with you, that when a couple people told me different things, but oh, you heard about that, or what did you hear about that? Because I heard this, and that's people that I do talk to, I do listen to, and it never got off the ground, never went anywhere. But love to know that one.
I hope you
Yeah.
find something out.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Just blow up the Big 12 right now. It'll never go. Like nobody at West Virginia will say yes to me on that
Yeah,
one.
nobody's gonna be like, yeah, nobody from Iowa State's gonna be like, yeah, he was seriously considering leaving for West Virginia because they are going to view themselves as equal or above West Virginia. That is what you're supposed to do when you talk about schools in your conference. And nobody at West Virginia is going to say that because they ended up hiring Rich Rodriguez. They're not going to say, yeah, well, Matt Campbell turned us down, so we ended up on Rich Rod. So
Now, what I can do is like Woodward and Bernstein. I can call and be like, hey, if you talk to Matt Campbell, can you just hang up? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you talk to Matt Campbell? And there's like a 20-second silence, and he goes, "Did you get that?" Like something like that, right? Maybe
yeah,
there's a way. There's a way that sources say they had preliminary talks or whatever, and then Matt Campbell can sit there and like, I feel like we're getting him in trouble for this for no reason at all. But like, that's how the point being that when you have a coaching search, there's a ton of names and information out there, and it's so hard to look into everything and everybody. We kind of got lucky on this one because it was a pretty narrow tunnel from start to finish, I think.
so have we come from start to finish now?
Yes,
Okay, that was a
we're good.
lengthy one. I didn't even keep track of time. Everybody gets mad because we always, oh, we got to wrap it up. We just kind of flowed there for a minute, maybe too long. That's
It's
okay.
good. It's all good. Well, here's to doing this in 3 years, right?
Sounds like.
No, never, never, never. I'm already getting blowback on that. The one little thing I saw in the Rodriguez contract that seemed interesting to me was that they agree to talk about the future after 3 years. Why is that in there? That's just a
Hmm.
strange thing, right? Like because everybody else has an automatic extension for
Yeah.
contracts that Baker's done. Um, Baseball coach, basketball coach, not the football coach. And all it says is that on or before December 31st, 2027, we'll talk about the future. Could be an extension, but it could be like, nah, this isn't working. It's supposed to work, Chris. I mean, obviously, when you hire somebody, it's supposed to work, but the motivation, the circumstances around this one is that the money will be there and the wind is supposed to follow. Um, 3 years is a long time. 3 years is a long time in 2025, 26, 27. Like, I don't know what that would be in like recent college football history, but 3 years it feels like a long time now.
I mean, that was something we discussed on the immediate rapid reactions pod to him being hired was one way or another, we're going to have an answer on this within 2 to 3 years. So I like either it's going to work out or it is working out at that time and there's going to be an extension or, and this was before we even knew about the 3 year thing, or it's going to flame out wildly and they'll move on. There's not going to be hey, let's give him 5, 6 years to figure it out kind of thing. So
Did that and it didn't work. Whereas they probably wanted to work for Rich Rodriguez. They wanted to work for Neal Brown, and look what happened. You can't spin your wheels for 2 years. You can't. So if it's not working after three, that's fine. If it's working after three, sure. Now, granted, they could probably on or before means you could do it before too. So if he has a great second year, they could throw an extension out there too. If he has a terrible first 2 years, they could probably cut it off right there too. So I guess the takeaway here is West Virginia not afraid to do business. Um, Maybe unconventional, may not be the most popular or universally accepted, but not afraid to do business. Just like us, Chris.
that's right.
We will throw you under the bus at some point or another. But no, I enjoyed my experience discovering Neal Brown.
Yeah. Was an enjoyable experience. Again, that very rough and tumble start there for me, at least as far as summer camps go, but very much a delight after that. Um, and no issues. So
Well, I was the Holgerson guy. Remember, everybody thought I was just bitter because I missed Dana. I did. I missed all those guys. I knew them for 8 years. That was tough. And
yeah,
like, I was not gonna go on year zero, and I was gonna try to like write bad stories, and Neal Brown would pack his bags and leave. I failed. I failed. Sorry. My bad.
Oh
Oh
well.
well. Well, Chris, back in the saddle here. Holiday's over. Got one more coming up with New Year's. Plenty on the site. Basketball, 31st, Lawrence, Kentucky. Lawrence, Kentucky. Jeez, I got that wrong the other day too. Lawrence, Kansas.
There you go.
Cover it then. Too much Kentucky in my head. Remember when Neal was going to go to Kentucky?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what they had to have it written in his contract too, because it never actually happened. They were worried about him going there. Maybe the lesson is said, slow down, just take it day by day.
Yep.
We will take it day by day. End of the year, into 2025. Until then, I'm Mike Casaza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.